Ramdam Musique, bienvenue sur votre radio.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, during a few weeks, we will have the opportunity to visit an exhibition of Dave Anderson. You are an American artist, and you have realized photographs about Charleroi. Dave, thank you for being with us, and tell us the origins, perhaps, the roots of the birth of that project.
Well, about 5 years ago, I had an exhibition here that the museum director, Xavier Canon, gave me on a project I did in Texas, in the United States, about a town called Viter, and the project was called Rough Beauty. And when we were here, Xavier showed me around the city, and he was beginning to think about a project where he had different photographers come and photograph the city, and he said that it was a possibility that perhaps I could be one of those photographers.
Was Charleroi inspiring for you?
Yeah, very much so.
In which way?
Well, I'm from Michigan in the United States, which is a very industrial...
Michigan, Chicago, and so on.
Yes. Yeah, Michigan is a very industrial state, and so I have a lot of respect for places that have industrial histories. Obviously, there's a great history of work and progress, and you could see all of that in Charleroi. But of course, the city also has had its difficulties over the years, and that's also like where I come from. So I was intrigued by a city that was, still having difficult times, but also trying to make its way through it, and also a culture of people that I found very interesting.
Yes. Let's start the visit of your exhibition. For instance, we have here a photograph of the landscape of Charleroi. It's a bridge. You take that picture from above a building, an Art Deco building. It's okay?
Yes, that's right. It's been a while since I've been in the building, but yeah, it was a beautiful building. I think we were in the apartment of a couple of artists, and it had a just wonderful view of the city. And one of the elements in the photo is the Ring, which is a very American-style highway that I believe Charleroi was the first, city in Europe to adopt the American highway system. So that's personal to me. I like that. And then, of course, the landscape and the cityscape, the skyline of the city is quite nice.
Charleroi, has a very bad reputation. It's said to be very, very dirty. Are you okay with that?
Well, I mean, Charleroi certainly has its problems, and the thing that seemed strange to me was how pronounced the reputation was here, because to me, I see a lot of cities like this all over the world, and it's much better than most. So the fact that I understand it to be somewhat synonymous with this kind of falling down European city or something like that, and to me that's it has elements of that, and those are things obviously every city wants to improve on, but it doesn't define the city to me in the way that it does to people who are here, and I don't think it would to people who never heard about it. There's a lot of media history, I think, negative media attention that the city has gotten over the years, and that defines it. But of course, you could find areas that are just as bad in Paris, and Paris is supposed to be the most beautiful city in the world. So to me, it's a very strange criticism. It's not unfounded. There are real problems, but it's just not. To me, I've been to cities that are ugly, and I've been to cities that are terrible, and this isn't one of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. For instance, you have photographs about the streets of Charleroi. On an historical point of view, the little streets of the center of Charleroi are very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. It's an older city, not by European standards probably, but to an American, it certainly has its older neighborhoods, and the architecture in those old neighborhoods is quite nice. But there's also a lot of change happening with, when I was here in 2010, there was a lot of work being done in the middle of the city, buildings being torn down, underground works being done. So it was very much being changed, and it was very interesting to see. And I'm curious to see how the city transforms.
Yes. In fact, we have the opportunity to discover many portraits. How did react the models? Did they accept to work for you?
Oh yeah.
How did it happen?
Well, I just walk around with my camera, and I see people, and every once in a while someone glares at you and says no photos, but usually people are willing to be photographed. And unlike in America where everyone tries to flash a cheesy smile, here, people were willing to just be themselves, which as a photographer, when people are willing to just keep the look that they had before you arrived, you're always very grateful, because that shows them in a moment that's very much them. Mm-hmm. So,
well, here we have we see, for instance, the napes of a lady. What does it represent?
Well, I'm curious. Do you know what it represents?
Oh, neck. The same ladies, no?
Yes, it is the same woman. Well, actually, this is one of my favorite images. Usually, a photographer wants to tell most of the story and give the information to the viewer, but in this case, I was withholding a lot of information. And if you look just down from it, you see this couch, this photo of a couch.
It's wigs.
Yes. So this is actually a prostitute in the prostitution section, and she had a series of wigs she would wear different days. So, and I knew that this neighborhood was being torn up, and it's still, even though it's not the happiest part of any city's history, the fact that people were willing to be seen and photographed. And that a museum is willing to exhibit something that does not show the upside of a city is very brave to me.
Yes, and they didn't want to show their faces?
Right. That was the one exception, is the prostitutes don't want their faces photographed.
Thank you. Come with me. And, of course, when we visit your exhibition, there is an important part dedicated to the industrial Charleroi.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can't come to Charleroi and not recognize its industrial history, and it's beautiful to me. I mean, it's, obviously some of the most important factories are shutting down and not, they're not prospering. Even if they're still open, they're probably not as prosperous as they once were, and so it's sort of a tragic side of the history, but it's also, it also shows what a spectacular achievement in industry has been made here over the years. But, of course, when you photograph a factory that's closing or shut down, there is a kind of melancholy to it. But I also really respect that history, and I think I respect any city that's proud of that history. A lot of places would probably just want to knock this down and get rid of it and build condominiums, but and I'm sure at some point something like that will happen to some parts of these areas, but hopefully some of the important part of that history will be preserved forever.
Mm-hmm. Come with me. I would like to speak to hear your explanations about that portrait. We see two old ladies, and they seem to have very. What could you say? They smile. They seem to be so happy.
Yeah, well, they were clearly very good friends, and this was at a senior citizens' home, and they were in an art class. And
in a art class?
Art, yeah. And so they were clearly pals, and one of the ladies has really wild hair. She kind of looks like Elvis. And so her friend, when I turned the camera on them, her friend started messing with her hair, and she pretended to be shocked and appalled and angry, but of course they both thought the whole thing was hilarious. And so this is just that process of them laughing hysterically.
They didn't speak English. How did it create a link with those ladies?
It's just the camera.
Just the camera.
Yeah, and smiling. People can tell. I speak a little bit of French, but just enough to confuse people. And, people know. They can tell on your face. They say, I don't know what the statistic is, that, 80% of all communication is without words. And I think when I'm photographing someplace where I don't speak the language, that's how I communicate. I have to. And so they knew.
For you, is it easier to communicate with your tongue, with your language, or with your photograph, with your camera?
Well, I think both are important. And when you take a picture, you want it to be something that people who aren't with you can understand to some degree. But of course, if you can talk about your photographs or talk with the people that you're photographing, that's always helpful. It would be better in some ways, although sometimes it's better if you don't. I know that in some situations it's good when I don't speak the language, because people can kind of treat me as though they can tell me a secret. It's sort of like going to confession. You can tell him because he can't tell anyone else because he doesn't really know and nobody knows him, and that's kind of that's a kind of thing that a photographer can enjoy if they don't speak the language.
We see the Carolos. The Carolos is a native people from Charleroi, and then we have the opportunity to see some people on the other side of the exhibition, and that represent workers, and they don't smile. They don't seem to be happy.
Well, I'm not sure which photographs, but certainly people don't usually smile in photographs. Well, I should take that back. A lot of people will smile for a photographer, but if you walk down the street, 90% of the people are not smiling. That's their normal state, is to be serious. Most of life is a serious affair. And so it's actually surprising to me how many people are smiling in this project. It's more than with most of mine. I won't tell people to be serious when they're smiling, but I also don't want them to smile if they're being serious. So, with people who are on the job and working in a factory, that's serious stuff, and it's tiring, and it can be repetitive. And so if they're not smiling, that doesn't hit me as indicative of great misery either.
Thank you very much.
Ramdam Musique, c'est fort.